FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary is in New York City today on a listening tour. He's going to be meeting with CEOs of major pharma and biotech companies. Dr. Makary joins us on set before he does that. And welcome. It's great to see you.
Great to be with you all.
So let's talk a little bit, first of all, why you're here in New York City. Who are you going to be speaking to? What's the point? Or I guess listening, not speaking.
Yeah, so look, there's a lot of things we need to do at the FDA. And so to inform us, we want to meet with executives, with pharma leaders, and we want to hear from them because I believe in listening, and we got to understand where in the user interface is the system broken. We're trying to ask the big questions. Why does it take over 10 years for a drug to come to market? Why do we have idle steps in the entire approval process? Do we really think if you have the cure for breast cancer, there should be long waiting periods where the application is sitting on a desk? Why do we apply? Why do we have people apply after every phase, preclinical, IND, phase 1, phase 2? Can we run more continuous trials? So when we listen to the CEOs, we learn so much. Like one of the big pieces of feedback that's come up in the other 4 CEO listening sessions has been communication. If they can have a couple 15-minute calls with the scientific team, that can save them a year of guesswork. Yeah. So we don't want the FDA to be a black box. That's why we're releasing all of our decision letters so people can see exactly how the review team thinks. Because markets want predictability, and the companies want predictability, and the drug makers and scientists want to know how to design drugs knowing what the review team is going to think.
I mean, I think that's so important, and it's definitely something we hear from industry as well. There have been some concerns in the last month, though, about the complete response letters that were issued for 2 drugs, Replimune and Capricor. Both those companies said that they were caught off guard, that it seemed like things were changing. Standards were changing at the FDA. They thought they were following the guidance they were given. Can you explain what happened there and maybe how that gets fixed?
So I can't discuss any individual product or individual decision of the FDA, but look, the process should be transparent, and it's not always perfect. Sometimes the reviewers act in their own sort of autonomy and independence. We're trying to create more standardization and create a culture where we have common standards. For example, sometimes we still require routine animal testing when a drug's already been approved in humans and used in thousands of people in Europe. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Because that slows down the process.
That slows down the process. We want to speed up the process, streamline it, modernize it. We're using AI now in our scientific reviews as an organizing tool. And, you know, these applications are gnarly. They're like, could be 100,000 pages. So we're going to introduce a radical concept called a page limit, you know, just like college applicants have. And we want to allow drug makers to get more predictability and insight.
I think about the way the private sector does things and the way the government does things. And I think about DMV or take your pick. And I'm just wondering, does the FDA need more money? Is that always the answer? I think public schools, the money keeps coming in, doesn't make it better. How do you private sectorize the FDA to do more, all the things you're talking about, streamline it, but without just throwing money at it? And you know how bureaucracies work. They don't.
Yeah, and every time there's a problem in government, the answer is always the same. More money, more authority, more people.
But there is criticism that you don't have enough right now.
So there's always going to be that criticism. My job is to do an assessment. And look, I came in right after a reduction in force, and so my job is to make sure that all the scientists and inspectors, and we have about 300 law enforcement officials with guns that go around and check out things like vape stores in our ports to make sure we're safe. We got to make sure everyone has all the resources. To be clear, there were no reductions in force or layoffs of scientific reviewers or of inspectors at the FDA.
There have been some who have left voluntarily after the departure of Peter Marks. And there's been some pushback from industry that says, wait a second, these were the people who were helping us streamline the process before. Now what?
Yeah, so look, I think the FDA does not rest on any one individual, and no one person makes or breaks a scientific division. There's over 1,000 scientists in that division. I've met with the leadership, the team. They're phenomenal. They're going to be strong. The FDA is going to meet all of its targets for review decisions this year. I think we're going to reduce the average time. We may hit a record number of approvals this year. And so the trains are running on time. The FDA is strong, and it's going to continue to be strong. It's one of the greatest brands in the world. So we have a lot to live up to. And you see the pride in the institution. Doesn't matter what political party's in power. You see a tremendous pride among the scientists there.
There was big news just last night with the departure of Dr. Vinay Prasad. He had been there as the director of the FDA Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. He was only there for 3 months. There was a lot that had happened, I would say, just over the last 3 or 4 days where he took some incoming, not the least of which was from the Wall Street Journal in an op-ed that they put out just saying that he was stopping innovation. He was opposed to some of these things. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the irony about that Wall Street Journal piece is that some of the drugs they criticized him for were not even in his center. He had nothing to do with them. And he did a tremendous amount of implementation of new policies in the time that he was at the FDA. I think the guy's a genius. He's published 550 scientific peer-reviewed studies in his career. He's 42 years old. So he gave us some of his time. Look, he's got family in California. The commute was brutal. And then when he saw some of these sort of smear pieces, he didn't want to be a distraction. So we're going to continue to talk to him. But we've got tremendous leadership there. Our top drug regulator, by the way, was not that role. Our top drug regulator is filled by this new guy, George Tidmarsh, MD, PhD, double fellowship trained in neonatology and oncology, and led La Jolla Therapeutics. So he is a drug developer himself. I think 7 different drugs he developed himself. He knows the FDA from both sides, and he's an academic with impeccable credentials from Stanford.
What will happen? Who's going to be coming in to replace Dr. Prasad?
So, look, we have a lot of interest from talented people, so we'll take a look at that interest. But we've got George Tidmarsh right now that sits as our top drug regulator.
Dr. Makary, part of this was, there's been so much focus on Sarepta, and it's something we watch closely because the stock was so massively impacted. But it was big news in the rare disease world as well, because this was a gene therapy that the FDA asked them to pull after there were 2 deaths with non-ambulatory patients from Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. They were pulling it from the non-ambulatory people, the boys who were further along in that disease and maybe more fragile. The FDA asked them to pull it from the ambulatory boys as well. And that was where the company pushed back and the families pushed back and said, wait a second, this is the only drug we have to fight a disease that is definitely killing our children.
Yes.
What happened? I know that the FDA has reversed course.
Yeah, so that was a very temporary hold on the ambulatory population, which has since been restored. The scientists at the FDA wanted to look at that safety signal after some deaths. So I stood behind them. I think the company is pleased with where things are. I can't discuss really any details of our conversations, but we are committed to that rare disease community because you can't possibly do a randomized controlled trial and have these rigorous standards when you have 50 or 100 people in the world that have a rare condition. And we've got to have regulatory flexibility. So we are working on a new pathway called the plausible mechanism pathway, by which we may not even need to see a study. We may just need to see a plausible mechanism and computational modeling suggesting that something is a safe molecule. And so you kind of saw that with the baby KJ example at University of Pennsylvania in gene editing and newborn.
That was just earlier this year, a few months ago.
Yeah, so I think that was a great moment for the FDA.
Doctor, let's say that we see another a powerful variant of COVID or even, hopefully, God forbid, a new novel pathogen. Messenger RNA technology can be upgraded. You can do it very quickly, and you can come out with something that it could probably, in my view, I think it saved our bacon to some extent last time. Are you comfortable with that technology if there's another pathogen that needs to be dealt with in the future? Would we use it?
I think our job at the FDA and our charge by Congress is to review an application and then determine whether or not the data allows the
Or do you think
support.
the technology is safe?
I think it can be. And look, safe is a relative term, right, because there are risks, and there are risks of the disease.
Right.
A lot of people say they've been vaccine injured. That's not been appropriately studied. We did approve an mRNA vaccine in high-risk populations for COVID just recently.
Just recently, okay.
And we do have a traditional vaccine with Novavax that we also approved for COVID.
It's a different usage for cancer vaccines, but messenger RNA is a powerful technology. It's not monolithic, obviously.
Yeah, it can be. Look, in my entire medical career, we've heard this is going to be the future. It's going to be this or this or, you know, and so there are a lot of different ideas.
Can I ask you, is anybody doing what you would describe as reasonable studies with reasonable, or that you would accept vaccine damage reports? You just described this idea of vaccine damage.
Vaccine injury.
Vaccine injury.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is anybody doing any meaningful studies that you've seen on that actual topic?
Yeah. So the HHS and the NIH are starting to look at that because hundreds of thousands of Americans have described vaccine injury. I personally know of some cases. I know of one friend who lost a parent from the COVID vaccine. I'm not saying that's a contraindication. I'm just saying there were some complications. Right. And when you blow them off entirely and say, look, it's 100% safe and effective, you alienate part of the public.
But you can rule out certain things. I mean, spike proteins don't last forever. Messenger RNA doesn't. Can we say definitively it isn't reverse transcribed into your genome? It doesn't last. The half-life is very quick. It's not around for a long time. These spike proteins, can't we do a study to rule out some of the conspiracy theories about it?
Yeah, and I think the bigger question is, what is the clinical outcome? You can find trace amounts of things of almost anything. Newborn today will have almost 200 synthetic molecules in their umbilical cord, right? These are from the environment. They call them forever molecules. And by the way, we're very interested in environmental health and chemicals and the food supply. It's a big priority in this administration. But yeah, we could benefit from some better studies. I think people think that we at the FDA commission our own studies. We don't. We review applications and we try to make determinations to the best of our ability. And we're trying to get rid of the idle time. Why do we do these studies where we sit around and wait for the clinical endpoints and then submit a gigantic application with manufacturing information? We can use that idle time to review the manufacturing application data before we get the final endpoints, and then get the final endpoints as a supplement and make a decision in a month instead of a year.
But for example, what do you make of like the measles outbreak that's taking place in this country?
Yeah, so I think you were on vacation when I came on last time. We talked about measles for maybe a long time. For a long time.
I'll leave it alone.
He gets a lot of time off. I don't know. But your agent is like a god.
The best way to prevent measles is through vaccination.
There you go.
That's a square answer.
Yeah.
Right. That's a clear answer.
You didn't need to be here for that. Yeah.
Marty, something else you've been focused on is what's happening with Kratom and opioids. And what is it that you're cracking down on? You just announced this yesterday. You're going after a synthetic version of it?
Yeah, so look, public health is slow to respond with tobacco and cigarettes, with heroin, cocaine, opioids. We don't want to get caught flat-footed again. There's a product that's a synthetic product in the vape stores that are popping up on every corner in America. And we want to educate people about that product. It's called 7-OH. It has many other names. Sometimes it has the name 7-Omega or 7-metragenine. And it is a synthetic byproduct of the Kratom plant. And the compounds of the Kratom plant, which, by the way, is not our focus, but the concentrated synthetic byproduct called 7-OH is an opioid, and it binds to the mu receptor, the opioid receptor, 13 times more potently. And so you can actually walk down to some vape stores in America and buy an opioid, and we are concerned. We're hearing stories of addiction since our announcement yesterday. I got a flood of communications about, gosh, we lost our son to this 7-OH product. So we don't want to get caught flat-footed. We have a huge...
It's for sale now?
It's for sale, and oftentimes you just walk in there and buy it. And by the way, 85% of the vape products in these stores are illegal. They're Chinese products. They're banned overseas. So we've got to clean this up.
Yeah, shut them down altogether.
We're going to have a big action coming out, and so we've released a big report on 7-OH. We want to educate school boards and parents to talk to their kids about it.
Kratom itself is illegal in 33 countries. Why not focus on that as well?
So it's important to distinguish the lexicon here. So the Kratom plant, which has been used in teas and other substances for centuries, may have some minimal health concerns, but it's not our focus. It's a synthetic concentrated byproduct that is stronger than oxycodone. That's where we're going to focus, and that's where I think we can distinguish where the real public health harm is. When you go really broad and say, look, everything is your brain on drugs, you're not really appropriately risk stratifying to parents who should know that this 7-OH product can be deadly.
Doctor, this is related. Obviously, it's public health, but the EPA is going to rescind or moving to rescind this endangerment finding on carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. That basically saying that trace CO2 is not a danger to public health. I mean, you had to connect quite a few dots with some questionable science to get to the point where, I mean, it doesn't cause smog, it's odorless, it's colorless, it's trace, we exhale 10 times the amount. They're going to do this. Is that a danger to public health if the EPA and Lee Zeldin are able to do this, in your view?
You know, to be honest, I don't know enough about that issue.
You're in charge of our public health. Can you look into it for us?
So it's really an EPA issue. But look, there's a lot of things where we may just need better research. We have never talked about environmental exposures that may, say, cause cancer. We only talk about the chemo to treat it. I'm not saying it's CO2.
No, there are horrible pollutants in the air, believe me. I'm not saying that there aren't. I'm just saying that not all pollutants are created equal.
Yeah, because we exhale it.
It's absurd. But,
right.
Yeah.
Dr. Makary, I want to thank you very much for joining us again. Dr. Marty Makary is the head of the FDA.
Great to be with you guys.